Hey, this is Kyle Ingram. This is my interview presentation with Mrs. Corrine Ackerson-Jones. So Mrs. Jones is the director of TRIO Student Support Services program. She's located on the Armstrong campus in Psalms Hall. So TRIO is referred to as a Student Support Services, and it is a grant-funded program. She describes in her own words what it is a little bit later, but from the Georgia Southern website, it's basically a program designed to provide opportunities for academic development, assisting students with basic requirements to motivate them and ultimately to achieve completion of their post-secondary education. So her career trajectory, she got both her bachelor's and master's from the University of Arkansas in education, not higher education though, but while she was doing an RA position in grad school, she found that she really liked mentoring and kind of coaching students, and then that really kind of led to her discovering higher ed as a career path. And so once she graduated, she actually ended up becoming the housing director there. After that, she took a 10-year hiatus from higher ed. Her husband was in the military, and so they traveled around a lot. So she did some volunteer work and stuff. They eventually landed in Savannah due to her husband being stationed locally, and she was persuaded by a friend to actually come back to higher education. So she started off back at Armstrong, becoming an academic advisor. From there, she went on to do a little bit more of academic affairs stuff. She was the coordinator of recruitment and retention at the Waters College of Health Professions. And from there, she took the leap to director of TRIO Student Support Services, which is her current position right now. So as director of trios, there's obviously good and bad parts. The best part, she said, the one-to-one time with the students and engaging with them, kind of playing mom and mentoring them. And the best part is just seeing it all pay off when they actually graduate. All the hard work and the sweat and the tears pay off. The worst parts, however, they are grant-funded department. So with that, there's a lot of mandates and restrictions on what they can and cannot do with the federal money they receive, and they obviously have to keep reapplying for funding. Their grant cycle is every 5 years, so every 5 years they have to sit down and do another application, and it's a rough part of the job. Her future aspirations are actually not with higher ed at all. She stated when she's finished up her time at TRIO, she is either going to retire and work with some volunteer organizations, or she might even go back to school. She mentioned seminary is something that was really close to her. Her husband is a pastor, and that's something they're heavily involved in, so that was a route that she was considering taking. Career advice, couple different things. Basically, first and foremost was keep your options open and don't sell yourself short. As she was in grad school, she was an RA. She wanted to go off and become a school teacher, and so she just kept an open mind, and then that led to her transitioning to higher education instead of middle grades. Also, just be aware of your surroundings, networking, and being aware of opportunities. You never know when somebody or something might come along to take you in a different direction or a way that you hadn't thought of before. And to also take initiative, ask to do more, go above and beyond without being told, and just being really flexible to show that you really want it. And lastly, to see the bad things about your position as stepping stones. So instead of having something you don't like, such as maybe paperwork or something, be seen as a burden in your position, just think of it as a stepping stone. So once I finish this paperwork, I can get to the things that I really love doing about this position. And so that way it just doesn't change your mindset so things don't seem so bad. So in her own words, the mission of TRIO was encouraging students, providing academic support, whether that's through tutoring, academic mentoring. They do a lot of workshops, whether that's for FAFSA or just professional development. They also offer financial assistance in the form of grant aid, so that could help with students staying in their dorms over the holidays who really don't have a home to go back to. It could help with non-academic barriers. She cited some students that have like access to food issues. So just really encompassing the full student there. And ultimately, the mission of TRIO is just to see those students who are in the TRIO program graduate with four-year college degrees. So it's staffed. There's the director, Mrs. Jones, and they pretty much all report to her. They have a retention specialist, Dr. Bullock, who oversees mentoring and tutoring services. Mr. Schranz is the academic success coach. Students assigned to her are students whose GPAs drop below a 2.5 and need assistance. Mrs. Simmons, administrative assistant, she obviously does clerical and organizational stuff within the office, but most importantly, she helps with data collection and kind of compiling all of that so that when they go to do the grant reapplication every 5 years, they have the hard data that showed that this is what TRIO did and this is why TRIO works and this is why you should keep giving us money. And they also employ a GA in the office as well to assist as needed. So the recent changes, every grant cycle might have a different focus because you have to tell the government what you're going to do with the money. So the last cycle, they really decided they want to switch from peer-to-peer tutoring and really make the foundation professional staff as the ones who tutor the students. Just because there's so many other different outlets on campus where you can go for peer tutoring, they really wanted to have an outlet where students could actually go to staff and receive a more professional um, tutoring process. So the position of retention specialist and academic success coach were actually created fairly recently, roughly 2 or so years ago. So the issues and concerns is that they are federally funded by the Department of Education. So the looming question is always, will Congress continue to fund TRIO? So they always have to write a strong proposal stating what they're going to do with the money, how it's going to be used, what have they done if they've already been receiving grants, what have they done, what kind of benchmarks have they hit. They need to show collaboration with the university, that they're both working together to ensure academic success of the students. And not everyone wants to work for soft money, as she called it, or grant money. It's harder to find good staff because some people don't like the idea of working for a grant where every 5 year period you might not have a job if you don't get reapproved for the grant. So she said that she's blessed to have the staff that she does, but overall, that's a looming concern that staffing faces in their office. So what they get every time they reapply for the loan, it's a 5 year grant of $1 million, so it breaks it down to about $200,000 a year. So after staff salaries are paid, the rest goes out to support students. So there's a lot of restrictions about what they can and can't do with that. Whether that's can't furnish an office, but you could buy supplies. So how do they even get chairs and desks for themselves in the department? But they can issue grant aid to students up to $1,000. That's a simple application, and that's something they can do. And if they're approved, it'll just be included in their financial aid award. And the idea there is it'll reduce the loan burden for the student. So if they can get $1,000 grant aid from TRIO, then that's ideally $1,000 less they'll have to pay back once they graduate. The biggest accomplishment, she said, is just seeing students graduate. That's the whole goal of TRIO. And so when they do that, that's obviously a big deal. They also have to hit benchmarks for the grants to kind of show that TRIO is working at the school. So they have 6 years to graduate 35% of the TRIO students, which encompasses about 140 at Armstrong. That's where they're kind of capped out as far as availability to serve students. Another really big accomplishment, she noted, was the collaboration with faculty. They are notified when TRIO students are in their class. So as a faculty member is going about the semester and they see things with those TRIO students, whether it's they need work in certain areas, they can contact TRIO and just let them know, hey, we had this issue. Maybe that's something we could work on. Or if they're doing it really well, that's something they can also let TRIO know, and TRIO can celebrate those successes and kind of build on that momentum going forward. Biggest difficulty, getting students to utilize the services. They incentivize students to utilize the tutoring, mentoring, the grant aids, but a lot of students apparently just don't want to take the initiative or take the action needed to utilize the services. So some financial aid goes unused in their department, and a lot of services that could benefit them just aren't utilized. So that's a big issue that they face. Their future plans are obviously just to continue to receive grant funding and ensure that TRIO persists. They'd also like to expand to receive a second grant, just for some of the TRIO students they have that do go on to have acceptance into clinical programs. There's a lot of additional costs, whether that's scrubs, lab coats, equipment like stethoscopes, just things that come with clinical programs that typically are provided by the student has to pay for. They'd like to be able to have secondary grants to help aid those students so they don't have to carry on additional financial aid burden. An issue that she stated that she's experienced in higher education, and this is based on her experience, is basically that admissions will attract marginalized students, whether that's minority, first-gen students, low-income students, into the schools. And sure, they go through FYE and stuff, but there's really no consistency of support beyond that. support programs, maybe like Pirates Pantry that helps like with food, or maybe Eagles for Eagles Foundation, just don't go quite far enough to assist, and or they don't help to overcome the stigma of a student having to maybe feel the shame of having to ask for help. She cited a lot of anecdotes that she's had past students or couch surfing back and forth, that have access to food issues, and if they were to lose, which are, and those are contributing factors to low academic success, and if they were to lose any kind of funding, Pell Grants, Hope, anything like that, they would literally be homeless students, and that really sometimes don't even have a home to go back to. So it's, we bring students to the university, but if we're not helping them succeed outside of the classroom, then we're kind of failing them, and they would, so not just teaching, you know, um, treating them as students, but also as just general members of the community that would be in dire straits, if their academics should suffer. So the overall reaction, I thought this was extremely insightful. Trio is very multifaceted, and she was really able to elaborate and describe all the different branches of it and the services they provide, and a lot of the things that they just go above and beyond for, because it really is, they treat their trio students like family, just to ensure their success and that they matriculate at the end of 4 years or however long it takes. And it really fleshed out the realities of these low-income first-generation students. I knew that that was something that students struggle with, but she really highlighted just how dire some of this can be. So that was really eye-opening, to be honest. She really explained how grant-funded programs work, because they are one, just the process of applying for the grants, what the federal government would look for in terms of approving them for a new grant cycle, and just all that kind of goes into creating a strong proposal. It was definitely helpful for career exploration. This is one of the reasons I got into higher ed in the first place, is that I wanted to kind of mentor and teach and shape and kind of create leaders in students. So this is definitely a department that would allow me to do that. So that was really helpful in highlighting maybe why I would pursue this type of department upon graduation. So would I want to work for Mrs. Jones? Absolutely. She was incredible. She was highly motivational, almost kind of like your mom. Like, she would just give you a kick in the rear if she, thought that you needed to get your head straight. And you can really tell that she cared about her students. She teared up a little bit when she was telling some of these stories about her past students. And she was just really devoted to developing those around her, mentoring, leading her department and her students. And I feel like that if I were to work for her, I could get a lot of good experience and learn a lot of valuable lessons from working with her. Would I want to work in Trio, though, however? It's still up in the air. Like we said, it is kind of hard and stressful to build a career around something like this that is grant funded, because every 5 years or so, you'd have to go through that. Oh, well, if this doesn't get approved, then I'm out of a job and I'll have to, search somewhere else. So that's definitely something to be hesitant about. You definitely cannot be in this for the money, working in Trio. And so I might like to work in a similar department. Maybe that was kind of academic success center, doing advising or success coaching through them, maybe not necessarily through Trio, or just a little bit of combination. But that's definitely something to consider and to be wary of, when you're looking at a grant funded department, whether that's Trio or something else. It's just that, what does the stability look like for this position? Overall assessment, however, was an A plus. It was a great experience, and there's a lot of different areas of higher ed that I'm interested in that just one practicum wouldn't really suffice. So it definitely would probably be something that I'm going to continue to do throughout my years as a graduate student, just so that I can explore the different departments, get a feel for what working in them is like, and to really kind of gauge if I would be fulfilled and happy in those type of positions. It was also a really great networking opportunity. Mrs. Jones was someone that I'd passed in the hall before on a couple occasions, but just really doing this process, I think, kind of like solidified a better relationship with her. And I feel like, if as long as we kept in touch, that I could count on her as a reference in the future. And so that's definitely something that would be really helpful if I were to expand this to other departments and other higher ed professionals. So overall, I love the assignment. It was a great experience, and I look forward to continuing to do this in other departments. Thanks.